Get everybody sitting down. Whoa. Hey, gonna give you about a 2-minute warning here, 2 to 3 minute warning. Come on in, have a seat. All right, we're going to get started here. Thanks for piling on in. Matt, if you could kick, yeah, thank you very much. All right, let me just literally try to take a minute and tell us how we got to this particular moment today. We put together a search team about, a year and a half ago at least. We've interviewed, we've talked, we've made phone calls, we've checked references, we've done all of those things over the last year and a half. So Dawn, thank you very much for your work. Elena, thank you very much for your work. James, thank you very much for your work. And so the way the process goes is that the search team makes a recommendation to the elder board, and then the elder board makes a recommendation to the congregation, and then the congregation votes on pastoral positions. And so we have walked through that process. The worship team has vetted and spent time with Mike. We passed that along as a recommendation then to the elders, and the elders spent time with Mike, asked him, for an hour or more, asked him questions, and then the elders voted to move that recommendation on to the congregation, which is what we will vote on tonight. So probably nobody here has spent more time with Mike than I have. We've had lots of meetings one-on-one. I've sat with him in lots of other meetings, like with the staff and with the elders and with the worship team, with the search team. I kind of have a PhD in Mike at this point. All of that to get to today and Mike leading us this morning in worship. I think it's an important moment in the life of a church whenever they hire a pastor. And it's really hard to hire well. As many of you know, if you're involved in leading, it's really easy to hire and really hard to fire. And we always want to be really careful on the front end of making any kind of decision like this. And I think the steps that we have taken up to this point, those that have been involved in the process have been able to ask questions. I've personally talked to many, many people that have been in those meetings. Hey, what'd you think? What red flags, all of those. So we've walked through all of this process to get to today. And now is the chance that you guys get to hear some answers to questions. We received somewhere around 35 to 40 questions. It's a lot of questions. A lot of them were very similar, so they got all moved together. And what we did was we kind of scrunched them together as best as we could. And then we took the ones that seemed like they were either the most frequently asked questions or the ones that seemed the most pertinent for this moment, this position, and we kind of moved those up to the top of the list, and we'll see how far we get today. So basically, all the questions that I'm going to ask to Mike are questions that you guys have submitted. I have a list. He has a list in front of him of those questions, and it's a good format the way we do it here because Mike at home has gone through all of these questions and has written down and kind of organized his thoughts with each question. And that works a lot better than just a free-for-all kind of asking and, he has to off-the-cuff answer. But I did have one really good question that I just got, and we want to start there. Don Stock asked, when will we sing one of the songs from your punk band from years ago?
That is locked in a vault and is never coming out.
Are there any videos that we can see of that? And did you have purple hair or nothing like that?
I did the really cringy early 2000s spiky.
Did you do the
hair,
spiky
yeah.
thing?
There you go.
Boy.
I got a fellow rocker over there. Man, I looked at you just about 2 minutes ago and thought you were my brother. Like you looked a lot. I did a double take, and yep. There you go.
Little known fact: when Danielle met me, I had a ponytail. True story. If you can imagine that. Jake, did you have a ponytail at one point? No? This is like God's judgment for my ponytail, I'm sure.
I will add this, though, about the punk rock album. I had one song that actually did really well amongst my group, and it was called Emo Kid. And it was a song that I wrote completely sarcastic, making fun of everything emo and punk rock, and then everybody thought I was serious and loved it.
Loved it, huh?
That was my infamous punk rock fame.
Moment.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's jump into these questions. And so what I did is I kind of took in the top section of all of these questions, there were a bunch that were kind of personal in nature, help us get to know you, those kinds of things. So we're going to start off with those questions. And so we've heard your testimony and a little bit about what makes for great worship. So let's just start off with other things that you enjoy doing, hobbies, things that maybe you like to do with your family. If you have an off day and you can go do something, what do you like to do? Tell us about those things.
Sure. Well, we have a little bit of an eclectic family, so I'll kind of phrase it like this. My son, who will hopefully be here second service, and some of you guys might see him, and he's hard to miss in a crowd because he is full of energy and life. But he is hyper creative, he's been working on creating his own movies for YouTube and stuff like that. And so as a family, we're kind of a movie buff family. Like there's nothing better than curling up on like a Saturday night with popcorn and a good movie and stuff like that. We try to pick movies that my son has not seen because he will narrate the entire thing. If you've ever met anybody like that, he'll say, yeah, this is coming, and then you're just kind of lost 15 minutes into the movie. But then, I love to get outdoors. I love to be active. I love to play golf. I might not look like it right now, but I like to run. I've run a couple of half marathons and stuff. And then my daughter is getting into athletics, so that's kind of where we start to add some spice to our life. So we got our son who's in the community plays, and then we've got my daughter who is she's a gymnast and loves to do that, and so she's flipping around all over the place. That's kind of how she walks through the house. She just cartwheels through the house. And then she's involved in basketball, so I like to kind of get that, kind of foster that, and we spend time doing that. So aside from that, I don't know, just work, I guess, is a hobby.
Yeah.
If you call it a hobby.
Mike, I need to ask you a question that's a make or break a deal. Okay. Do you like Hallmark movies? Think about your answer.
No.
Thank you. You're hired. There you go. That's all we needed to know right there. Literally, last night, My wife took me to a rom-com movie, terrible. Anyway, on the way home, she's like, do you think we could get the Hallmark Channel for just like the next 2 months? I said, no. So, all right, next question. How did you get started in music? Some of that you answered this morning. How'd you get started in music? What instruments do you play? And how has this played a part in your walk with Jesus?
Yeah, so I shared a little bit of that during my testimony, and really, if you want to talk about music, I started in 5th grade, like most kids, playing in band. I played saxophone, and that's where I got my first exposure to, more kind of classical music and some theory and some things like that. But then, really, as I got into my high school years, always had an interest in music. Always loved music, and was the kid that would be sitting in my room and just laying on the bed listening to music at night. And so I convinced my parents to buy me a guitar, and didn't take any lessons or anything, but would sit in my room and kind of plunk around on that a little bit. And that's what really led my dad to say, hey, you seem to have an interest in doing that. So when we do this youth group thing, this youth service, maybe you could jump in and do it. And that was amazing. For whatever reason, that gave me the outlet to begin pursuing that. And I didn't tell the full story there. I ended up on guitar, but we were so starved for instruments, and we were so bad that I started on drums. A week and a half of that, like almost in the middle of worship service, they kicked me off of that. And then the next week, I played bass guitar, and I made it a couple of weeks on that until we finally landed on guitar, and that's kind of where it stuck for me. So that's what I really invested myself into learning over the next few years. But then as I got involved out at Kearney in the worship ministries there, I had really kind of started to dive deep into the musical world and the worship world. And so then I got to really expand my skill set on bass guitar. And I can actually make it through a service without being kicked off on drums. Like I can fake it at this point in time. But that's kind of a little bit of my musical journey and what I've learned. Some of the instruments I am trying to pick up is piano, just because I love it, and it's a great sounding instrument, but it's coming slow. But yeah.
All right. Next question. Is there any particular person or persons, parent, teacher, friend, pastor, music instructor, coach, worship leader, etc., that has had a special impact on you becoming a worship leader?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've mentioned my dad a couple of times because he gave me that opportunity at first. But then there's this guy in Kearney. His name is Kevin Andrews, and I think he's got some connection to this church a little bit. But Kevin was our youth pastor. And when I started going to church in Kearney, he was kind of fresh and new, and the church in Kearney was in this weird transitional phase. They'd just come out of a church split, and so they hired a new pastor, and then they hired Kevin to come in and kind of get the youth ministry going. And Kevin is a very forward thinker, vision-oriented kind of guy, and loves to build things. Very thoughtful in how he builds ministries. And so at one point, he's trying to get the youth ministry going, and he's getting involved in the worship at the church and trying to transition that into maybe a new phase there. And so he tapped a couple of us, about 4 of us, on the shoulder and said, hey, would you guys just come and really dive into this and help me get this going? And so that's where I got plugged in at I would play for the youth group on Wednesday nights, and I talked about we started a college ministry that was called Overflow, and I just met someone in the hallway that had someone go to Overflow. Yep, right back there. So that was really cool. We crossed paths during college during that time, and that was a lot of fun. And then, I was involved in, they called it the contemporary service. Like if you guys have seen or heard of that, they did the traditional service in the morning, and then they did second service, they did the contemporary service. And, that was fun. For the first, I want to say 6 weeks, they took the punk rock guitarist and hid him behind a plastic fern. Like, I don't think you guys have any on stage. I come to despise those because they hid me behind it for like 6 weeks. And it was like, he plays too loud, he moves around too much, hide him. But my time there was extremely formative. learning underneath Kevin, learning about ministry, and being involved with a group of guys and gals that were just on fire for seeing what God could do on the college campus at UNK. And then when you kind of expand that to some broader influences, Kevin took us to a few events, one of them being Challenge in Utah, which is kind of a big youth event. They do it every other year, I believe. And so I got to go along as like a chaperone during that. And this was the time when Chris Tomlin was coming out with one of his big albums. Like, he was just kind of blowing up on the music scene. And I showed up at that event, and he walked out on stage, and he led us in worship. And it was the most overwhelming and exciting thing that I have ever seen in my life. And I got to see a guy, and to this day, I don't know that there's anybody that can walk into a room with a simple song and a simple melody and inspire people to worship with such passion like I've seen with Chris Tomlin. And so that was, from an inspirational standpoint, that was huge for me. And that was, that was the type of thing where we got done with the event and we're riding on the bus home from Utah, and we are playing live recordings back that we heard of the songs, and we had our guitar with us, and we're like tabbing them out so that we got to church that next Sunday, and we were playing songs that hadn't even been released to the radio yet, because it was such a cool and exciting time for us. And so, as far as that setting me down a path, giving me opportunity to explore the passion and energy that God has put inside of me to be involved in music and worship ministries and stuff like that, those were two huge influences for me right about that college age, where I was, most of us are trying to figure out, like, all right, do I go take that desk job somewhere or go pursue something else? Or, that kind of just really solidified in me that, God was calling me to ministry, and that's what I'm going to do. And I have no idea how it's going to work out, but that's where I'm going.
All right, next question. I'm going to tweak it just a little bit. The question is, what has God been teaching you the past 3 years? But really, in your sequence of events, you guys moved back to Omaha 2 years ago, right? And then, is that not right?
You talking about to Omaha or from Omaha?
To Omaha.
No, that's been about 6 years ago.
Oh, so you guys were there. And then you moved, when did your wife start commuting to Glenville?
Yeah, so it would have been right about September of the pandemic.
Okay, 2020.
Yes.
Okay. So then you guys moved to Glenville. So really, there's the last 2 years have been really different for you guys. But over the last few years, what are some things that God has been teaching you?
Yeah. Well, those 2 years were really interesting, really challenging for us, for me personally. We went through this whole season of life heading up to the pandemic, and then especially during the pandemic, where I was working for a missions organization called Praying Pelican Missions. And to clarify, it's not a mission to go pray for pelicans. I just want to make sure that's clear, because every event I ever worked for them, that was like the second question I got from anybody, and they always had a smirk on their face. But it's actually a really cool story, but how they came about the name. But I was working for them, and I was, at the same time, I was working through some schooling that I decided to start into. And then this opportunity with the farm came up, so Nikki was commuting. And, there were some things going on at PPM that were just heavy and challenging. And so that was a time where I really felt like I had to lean into God's promises. I had to lean into the idea that, that God was going to pull me through that. Because there was just a lot of times that I just got to my end. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to pour out anymore. And I was really, and I had mentioned to you during one of our meetings, I felt like I got to a place where I was really out of balance, where the inputs were not matching the outputs. And so through that season, I really had to kind of lean into that trust and faith in God. And then recently, I feel like that has transitioned now that we are here in Hastings, and He's been relighting a fire inside of me to really to step into the calling that He has for me, to see what's new, to see what's next. He's been getting me excited about, where He's going to take me in life, reinvigorating me with some vision, which for me in particular, that's always been a defining factor for me, is is that thing out in front of me that I am aiming for and running towards. And so God has been kind of reigniting that inside of me. And one of the really cool reminders during that he's been teaching me in the last couple of months, or I should say, reminding me about, is this really simple concept of a table, and you're sitting down for dinner, and it's you and Jesus. And you have this opportunity to interact with him. You have this opportunity to spend time with him, to have him pour into you. But then there's that guy that walks by and recognizes you and wants to say hi, and then he welcomes himself to sit down at the table, and he starts talking to you, and all of a sudden, you're disrupted. All of a sudden, your attention is divided. And in this analogy, that person represents the devil. That person represents someone who is pulling you in a direction, something that is pulling you in a direction other than God. And so you have that choice. You can allow that to happen, or you can say, you know what, I need to fix my eyes on God. I need to continue to draw my source from God, and I need to continue to safeguard this relationship and this focus. And I think that simple analogy and lesson, or whatever, that I've been kind of carrying with me for a couple months now, has really led to that shift in my spirit, to where it's feeling like a new thing is coming, a new season is coming.
All right, so we move kind of away from the question, kind of more general questions, to kind of more specific ones. How do you handle conflict, and what's your typical style of conflict resolution?
Yeah, love this question. I think like anybody, conflict is never fun. But I believe it's biblical, and I believe that it is less painful to address conflict right at the source, and as soon as you possibly can. And so I don't like to shy away from it, and I like to approach that. But the other side of that is I like to listen, and I want to find out as much of the story, the whole story, as I can, because I think there's a principle that I read at one point where you can be so right that you're wrong. Does that make sense? Where I feel like there's a number of times where you can walk into a situation and you know what's right, and you're trying to fix the problem, you're trying to make things happen the way you want them to happen, but you don't realize you just ran over somebody. Or that's a situation where maybe you need to step back and take a softer approach to that. And so that has really kind of instilled in me that conflict resolution is based around communication. It's about sitting down with people. It's about hearing both sides. It's about hearing and finding the commonalities, and finding a way to reach that resolution in a way that really brings everyone involved forward, as opposed to just trying to bowl through and make something happen.
Tell us about a time you failed, and what did you learn from it?
Just one time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's narrow it down to one.
Just one. Okay. No, actually, I shared this story a little bit with the worship team yesterday. We got to have breakfast together, brunch. But so one of my favorite things that I got to do is something that I actually created during my time at Praying Pelican Missions, was a missions conference. And we did it down in South Florida, down in Fort Lauderdale. And we would bring our entire team. So we had about 75 full-time staff. We had another 150 plus seasonal staff members that were all stateside. We'd bring them down, and then we'd bring in a whole host of pastors from all over the Caribbean and Central America and stuff to this conference, where we would spend the weekend training and preparing for a summer of ministry. Really cool. But we got to put on this conference. We called it the Borderless Conference. And one of the first years that we really started to go for it, I put this thing on, and I went through and I did all this cool, really designs and stage sets and things like that to make it feel like this really engaging and exciting and cool conference, right? Well, I did this kind of bootstrapping it. So even now, I feel very confident in how much money we spent on it and what we did with it. But what I didn't realize is the glossy appearance that had a negative impact on all of those international pastors that came there. By our standards, it was pretty subdued, and it was really cheap to put on as far as the production of what we did. It looked good, but it was bootstrapped, right? But to their perspective, they're coming from a place where, for instance, a pastor in Haiti who is pastoring 3 different churches that are all dirt floor churches, and he's hopping all over the country, or a pastor from Guatemala, and they show up and they look at it and they say, wow, you guys have a ton of money. How come we're not getting that money? Like, we need that in our church, right? You guys need to share that with us. What I didn't realize I had done is, either in communication or in presentation or whatever, what I had done is I had created a scenario that had the potential to short circuit a really amazing summer of ministry, because a huge value for the organization is not to create that consumer exchange, type exchange between what the missions organization did and the pastors that we were serving and working alongside. We didn't want it to be about that. We wanted it to be about a team of people coming in and serving in the local church in a way that would uplift them and build them and encourage them and empower them to take their ministry further and forward, right? Well, now I had created a conversation that weekend where our staff members were having to sit across from these pastors and try to roll back this idea, this concept of we're the rich Americans coming down to your context. It might not sound like a lot, but in the missions world, it's a huge deal. And it's something that they write books about. And so I had to eat crow on it. I had to sit in the recap meeting after the conference was over and get that feedback and stand up in front of all of our staff members and say, man, I'm sorry. I'm gonna try to do better. And I had to take that feedback and incorporate that into what we did the next years and the way that we communicated what was happening, the way we communicated how we used our resources, and the way that we chose to go about producing a conference so that it became something that was a launching pad instead of a hurdle that people had to get over. So, all right.
What's your preferred method of incorporating new songs, and how often?
So I have a little...
Just real quick, I want to just say, we are streaming this morning because there are a lot of people that can't be here. We have people that are traveling. So if there's somebody, I just don't want to forget to say it later, if there's somebody that couldn't be here today, but they still want to watch, it is, the link is on our website, and this session right now is being streamed. I forgot to say that at the beginning. So welcome those who are watching from their car phone. Not while they're driving, though, just saying. Okay. Sorry, go ahead. New songs.
That's a good disclaimer, not while they're driving. Yeah, incorporating new songs. So I think that as musicians, and I'm just going to speak blanketly for everybody so you can tell me if I'm wrong when I'm done. But, we spend a lot of time learning songs. So we consume songs. We spend time in our house or in our car driving and listening to music. And so a song that we lead for the congregation, it might be a song that before it gets led the first time, we've done it 50 times on our own. And so we might already be a little bit sick of it by the time we get up to lead it. But one of the things, the values that I have is that as a congregation, as a church, sometimes that might be the only time you've heard the song. And so what I like to do is I like to create a little bit of a pared down set list. My metric is generally 10 times the number of songs that you do on a Sunday morning. That becomes kind of your repertoire that you're working from. And then when we introduce a new song, I like to do it one week, and then we might do it the next week, or we might give it a rest, but then in the course of a month, do it at least 2 to 3 times. And that way, as a congregation, you have an opportunity to sit with that song a couple of times, and we can get a little feedback, and we can figure out, well, did that hit? Was that something that was meaningful to our worship and to what we do here on a Sunday morning? Or is that something that just completely missed? And if it did, then fine, that's great. There's a world of music out there that we can explore. And then if it's a song that we decide we want to keep in our repertoire, then we look through that list and we figure out, is there a song that might need a break, that we'll take a break with, and we'll replace that with the new song. And so that's kind of my general rule and how I go about doing it. With the goal being that you develop some familiarity with the song, and it has a chance to take on some life within the church instead of just being something that gets thrown at you and you're trying to figure out the song while you're singing it.
What is the most important factor in corporate worship? Parentheses, style, musicianship, corporate response, etc.
The important thing for me is that people engage with Jesus. To be honest with you, and I've shared a couple of times that, I have certain things that I'm skilled at and gifted at, and as far as producing music or producing a service, but I've seen incredible production value, incredible musicianship, amazing songs fall completely flat and do nothing for the church. But then I've seen, really terrible, as in guitars out of tune, bad systems, no lighting, anything like that, moments where the church is really just, the people in that moment really engaged with what was going on and worshiped God. And so the defining characteristic for me is that we develop a program that when people walk in the room, that they're engaged. I almost like to put it like this, that the worship leaders stop only being on the stage and they begin to be a part of our congregation, where you guys are a part of that, leading our church and pulling our church forward in worship. When someone shows up new, that they're seeing you engage and they're seeing you connect with the music and you're seeing you engage with Jesus and not just walk in and have a stale experience, but it pulls them into it too, because they see us as a church, that we're not here because the seats are comfortable or Pastor Scott has a really incredible message series going on or something like that, but it's because we're here because we love Jesus and we're excited about engaging with him and engaging in community together.
Just as a follow-up to that, do you think that people can engage in the music part of a service without singing?
Yes. I might say there's some people that probably shouldn't sing.
I resemble that. Come on.
No, well, there are obvious things in a corporate environment that you can do to really draw people in, and I would encourage anybody that wants to sing and express to do that and do that freely, because it's not about impressing anybody in this room. It's you engaging with God and you responding to who God is. But there are some people that don't love music, that just doesn't move them, and that's great. Honestly, I would say my wife likes music, but the number of times I've gotten in the car after a church service and I've asked her, what did you think of worship? And she goes, it was okay. And it wasn't because she didn't engage with it. It's just she's not going to stand there, and she's not that type of person where she's going to sing and express herself that way, but she soaks it in, and she likes to spend that time to meditate and to pray and really be in the presence of God as opposed to singing. And so, while we might try to direct certain things, the most important thing is that you are spending that time focusing on God and engaging with Jesus in that moment as opposed to just going through the motions.
What are your thoughts on using music from questionable sources? And maybe we need to define questionable sources. There's a whole music industry out there that is pushing out all kinds of music that churches are using. There are all kinds of big churches out there. Their worship team is writing music. We may not all agree with the theology of either the industry or that church, but they're still pushing out music that we could choose to sing. So what are your thoughts about using music from questionable sources?
So my litmus test on if a song is something that we can utilize in worship has less to do with where it came from necessarily, as in, do I agree perfectly with the theology of the church, and it has more to do with the content of the song. And so if the content of the song is good and the content of the song is engaging to our community, to the people that are in that room trying to worship, and it really connects them and allows you to put your focus on God and to worship with your whole heart, then I am not opposed to using it. I do understand the conversation around certain churches that, maybe we don't agree with certain parts of their theology, or maybe there was a scandal in the church that, that really hit the news, and we don't agree with what happened there. And so I certainly understand the conversations around by performing that song, because we pay licensing fees. And so when you sing a song in an environment like this, there are some funds that through the industry trickle back to that artist, right? That's how they make the money to make the music. And I understand that, and I certainly do get that. But for me personally, I think there's a certain element of, if it inspires me and it connects me with God and it puts my focus on Jesus, then that's what drives it for me. But I will also say, if it ever becomes an issue to do a song from a particular church because we don't agree with something at that church, and it becomes an issue that disrupts our ability to worship, it's gone. Like, it's not a hill I'm willing to die on just because I love the song. It's more important to me that people are engaging with Jesus and people are worshiping in a really honest and authentic way.
So you would use songs that were written by imperfect people?
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
So
But
hard
yes,
to
I mean,
believe that's true.
That's essentially the if you want to boil it down to that.
Yeah.
That's essentially.
It's actually a really hard question. I received several questions from, maybe we'll call it the industry. And I think it's an important question, but like in a lot of things, we're all imperfect people. You guys maybe didn't know this, but even between Daniel, Matt, and I, there are things that we don't agree on theologically, right? So if we're only going to sing songs that agree 100% with every position of this church and all of the preferences and principles of this church, we wouldn't sing anything, right? So trying to figure out those songs that are, at least in and of that song of itself, are theologically accurate, and let some of the other noise die away unless it gets to the point where some other decision has to be made. It's a harder question because the industry and the multi-billion-dollar industry that's really pushing a lot of songs, that's growing up all around us. A lot of the songs that you guys hear, if you're listening to like My Bridge Radio, those are songs being produced by industries for the purpose, in a lot of ways, of making money. And so it's really hard behind the scenes to try to find that balance between, hey, this is a really good song that's really going to help us engage and connect with Jesus. Maybe I'm not where they are with spiritual gifts or whatever, but those are hard decisions to make. And I think it's just going to get harder. I hate to suggest that money pushes and makes a lot of decisions, but it really does, even in the Christian world. It's just the reality of it. Maybe I'll skip some of these industry questions a little bit. There's several there. Great question. This is a part-time position for you. So what else are you going to do? Or do you hope that it's full-time someday? Or give us your thoughts about part-time.
The straight answer to, am I going to look for another part-time job? No, because I already have a couple other irons in the fire. And I had to apologize to my father-in-law because I did not list dairy farmer more prominently on my resume.
What?
And so he came home from church I think it was last week.
Was it last week?
And he's like, hey, what's the deal here? I said, well, sorry. But the truth is, my wife is the one that is really invested in the dairy, and I am really supporting her in that. And with that, there are some things, some dreams that she has as far as what she wants to accomplish in that as they transition to the new season of farming in that family, which is all new and exciting to me because I knew nothing before we got there. But I am in there and I'm helping her in that and helping her to develop some of those things. One example of that being a side project of the farm is that she runs and operates a coffee cart, coffee trailer called Palomino Coffee. So if you've ever been to the farmer's market over by the museum, yes, by the museum, on Saturday mornings, she's got this almost blueberry-colored horse trailer there that's a full-service coffee shop, Palomino Coffee. And so come on down. It's really great coffee. But, I'm helping her with that and helping expand on that and develop some things there and some products that she wants to release in the future. I also have a company that is called Spark, and I launched that last spring with a partner a friend of mine out of Omaha, and he works for a large AV company called Morrissey in Omaha, and that's his job. Is a lot of what he does is actually he works with churches to set up their AV installations in their church and throughout the building, and then when he's not working with churches, he does large venues like the UNK Arena. I think he did some stuff at the Lincoln Arena, basketball arena, and stuff like that. And so he and I kind of partnered up because for the last 20 years, in and through ministry, starting at Kearney, we've always been involved in producing live events and doing marketing and production and stuff like that. And so I haven't talked this much in a long time. But
Welcome to my world, all the time.
I was just going to snap back at that. I really shouldn't. But that's something that's kind of been fun and exciting for us, and that's something that we're continuing to work on and kind of grow on the side. This last week, we got to help produce an event called Big Idea Grand Island, which is supporting young entrepreneurs with, they get to pitch, and then if they win, they get a $5,000 grant is what they got. And so we got to produce that event for them and had a lot of fun doing it. And so that's kind of something that I have going on the side, and I've shared throughout the entire process that it's kind of been a side gig for us that we really enjoy doing, and we're kind of just seeing where it goes and seeing what happens there. But as far as being full-time here at the church, I would be excited about that. I would be 100% on board with doing that at some point if that's where we got to at some point in time. But for now, I'm excited about the idea of a part-time opportunity, and I got these other things that I can keep myself busy when I'm not here trying to do stuff. Thank you so much.
Just as a side note, give them the connection to coffee and how that has become a part of the Rhoades life, both in Minnesota and back down to here.
Do you want the long one?
Evidently not. We got about 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. I'll sneak this in. So coffee has been, it's been something that we've been involved in for a while. At the missions organization at PPM, they launched a few years after I started, maybe 2 years after I started, they launched a coffee shop in Duluth, Minnesota. And it was a full-service craft coffee, third-wave coffee shop that also did kind of farm-to-table, but from scratch food and everything. Had a full kitchen and whatnot that they would serve food out of. So kind of a restaurant/coffee shop thing. About 6 months into the opening of the coffee shop, it was not going well. And so they happened to tag me and said, would you be interested in doing this and coming up and helping us alongside what you're already doing for the organization? But we noticed that like 8 years ago, you were a manager at a Scooter's coffee shop for a little while. So you must be the expert, right, in coffee. Can you come help us do this? And so we agreed to move up to Duluth and took our family up there. And over the course of a year, really invested ourselves into that coffee shop. And the cool thing about it is part of their vision was these coffee shops would be planted into communities and become a hub of ministry and really support some of the things that they were doing within communities. So this was kind of the test run. But we got involved there. That led us to a whole nother level of coffee knowledge, which is, coffee is just a crazy industry as far as when you talk about all in relation to the farmers and how they're treated and what that means for the end consumer. And it was such a a high-level coffee community up in Duluth that like they would, if you were carrying Starbucks, they'd look at it like it's gas station coffee. They were just really, you could call it snobbish. But we learned a ton, and over the course of the year, we got it to a place to where essentially it was breaking even, and we sold it to someone else so that it didn't have to be kind of a drain on the missions organization anymore. But during that time, we kind of fell in love with it. Kind of fell in love with not only just the craft of doing coffee, but really the engagement of doing coffee. I had a blast standing behind the counter and getting to know people. You know, when they would walk in, they'd show up the same time every day and get their cup of coffee, and you'd have a little conversation. And it turned out to be this really, really fun and engaging place to be, where you got to meet people and kind of learn a little bit of their story and be a part of their life in some way. And so that kind of stuck with us a little bit. And when we moved back to Nebraska, we just decided we might as well go do something ourselves. And so we started off with a little coffee cart. It was literally built a countertop, and we put some coffee stuff on it and a tent over the top of us, and we showed up to events and farmers markets, and we serve coffee and make coffee out of that. And that led us to this last year. We bought this old 1970s horse trailer that was just a rust bucket when we bought it, and spent the winter with my dad kind of restoring it and building it out to be a coffee shop on the inside of it. So she serves, you know, everything you can think of, your lattes, your black coffee. She serves crepes out of there, which is awesome. And what we're working towards in association with the dairy is she wants to produce her own ice cream using the products from the dairy and products grown on the dairy, as far as, you know, even fruits and things like that. But you know, our dream with that is to eventually, you know, maybe transition that into a brick and mortar store or something that we can have a little bit bigger footprint there. But it really comes back to, you know, aside from the fun and the art of doing coffee, it's just fun to talk to people. You know, nobody's really upset when they get their cup of coffee, at least after they get their cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. Some are a little grumpy beforehand, but it's just fun to meet people and engage with them, and that's why I think that's probably stuck with us.
All right, it's time to ask the question. Let's ask the question. Okay, what's the value of hymns, and what's the appropriate place in worship for them in the kinds of services you'll be putting together?
Okay. I love hymns. I grew up in a church, you know, I shared with the worship team. I grew up in a church where the pastor would walk up at the beginning of service and he'd open the hymnal, tell you what page to turn to, and then he would lead worship, and then you'd take your offering, and then he would preach. And that was the style of what I grew up in. So hymns do have a very nostalgic and special place in my heart. You know, that's when you sing some of those hymns, it's really easy to get caught up in something that, you know, has been a part of your worship for really decades at this point in time. So when it comes to, you know, corporate worship, I think there's recognizing that we have all sorts of tools, if you will, at our disposal when crafting and designing an engaging experience for people to come in and connect with God and engage with God. And hymns can be a huge part of that. You know, I like it when we do them traditional. I like it when we add in a chorus and maybe rework the hymn a little bit, or we mash it up with another song or use a part of a hymn for something. But really, as you know, my methodology or my thought process going through that is one, does it really serve what we're trying to accomplish that service? Like, is that hymn, is that really the best song to engage people in what we're trying to engage people in that service? And then I think it's trying to find that appropriate balance within the congregation and where we're trying to go and what we're trying to move towards. As far as how many hymns you incorporate on a specific Sunday. And so it's trying to use that level of discernment to where we're able to accommodate, you know, accommodate those desires and those, really the love of hymns and stuff for people in the congregation that have that, but also create an identity of worship that really defines our church and is something that we can move forward and is forward thinking in how we choose to engage people in worship and ultimately engage our community.
How many of you guys would say you grew up in a church that sang mostly hymns? Yeah. So what happens when you grow up in a church that way, you connect part of your spiritual life to those hymns that hold so much meaning for you. There's nothing wrong with that at all. There are hymns, I remember some hymns that we sang at like my grandma's funeral. Those are always going to have special significance for me, and they should. It's part of my journey with Christ. Tell us, do you have one or two or three favorite hymns?
Come Thou Fount, Be Thou My Vision, would be two that come to mind right away.
Do you like the Irish twist on that? Because wasn't that one of those Irish, isn't that an Irish
one?
song? Right? Yeah,
Be
Be
Thou
Thou My
yeah.
Vision is is it Welsh or Irish? I can't remember now.
Irish. It's a 700-year-old.
Wait a minute, did Ireland exist back then? Did you ever read the book, How the Irish Saved the World? It's right there. Yes, it's at the top of the reading list for Daniel. right above the Bible, evidently. So, so a couple favorite hymns. What? Yeah, so Come Thou Fount, Be Thou My Vision. Any other ones?
Those are the two that come to
Those are
mind right
top
now.
couple. Yeah.
I'm afraid to speak, and I'm going to get yelled down.
Yeah,
like-
no doubt. No doubt. Tough staff. You notice that? Man, tough. Yeah. Those are good. You know, hymns have had a great, important part of this church for a lot of years. And I would say that we're not going to stop singing them. And I like them both traditionally, and I like them when there's, let's see, Nick Drake called them Chris Tomlin size the hymns. Add those things. Sometimes I think when you add it, it takes away. Sometimes it enhances, so it's not always good. But we're going to continue to sing the hymns because I think, for lots of other reasons, but I want the kids of this church to know those hymns. I think it's important for them to know those hymns as they grow up. And so we're going to continue to sing them. Maybe not at the frequency everybody would love, but we're going to continue to sing them. We got time for one last question. Is there a specific one that you would like to answer of all of this list that we've gone through?
No, go for it. Whatever you want.
Okay. Maybe as the last question here today, tell us just about your personal spiritual life. And, what does it mean to you to grow in Jesus personally? Because obviously, before you can lead us as a pastor, and this is a pastoral position, so there's a whole shepherding aspect to this position, right? So before you can lead us as a pastor, there's got to be a fount of growth growing within you. So how do you keep that fount bubbling?
Yep. So from a kind of a personal growth standpoint, I really strive to create rhythms in my life. And so, right now what that means for me is in the morning I wake up and I've got a simple, daily spiritual devotional that I go through, and then I spend some time journaling and reflecting on that. In addition to that, I've got a book I'm reading through, and I'll typically kind of keep refreshing that and keep that a part of it. So after I've spent time, in prayer and reflection and going through that devotional, then I'll spend a little time reading in the book. And that's just kind of a way for me to expand my thinking or just consume something that's encouraging or whatever. And then as far as on a daily basis as I go through my life, what I have found is extremely important for me is to surround myself with a few men, a few individuals to where I can share everything from the good, the bad, the ugly, everything with them, and have them provide godly counsel back to me, provide insights back to me, help me see things more clearly than maybe I'm seeing them for myself. Sidebar. I got myself, that was a squirrel moment. I'm sorry. I got distracted there.
I
But
asked
the-
Matt to go back and grab your family so we can introduce them. I saw them back there a few minutes ago.
Yeah, they've kind of been wandering back
Yeah,
and forth.
so I just want to
Yeah.
ask them if you'd go back
Gotcha.
and grab them.
So those are two rhythms that I keep in my life, and along the lines of individuals that I can go to and that are going to mentor me and keep me accountable. One other really simple rhythm that I've come to really appreciate is that I've got a group of 3 guys that I wouldn't call them mentors, but every Wednesday morning we get on a prayer call and we just share life, and then we pray and we move on with our day. And it's a 15-minute call, and it's been fun just to see life, go through life with them in really quick snippets and simple ways. And through that, I've shared that, I've had the opportunity to pray for. We got 30 seconds left. I've had the opportunity to get to know a little bit about them, to pray for them very specifically, to see God work in their lives, and then I've had the opportunity to receive that back from me, and that's been a really powerful thing. And so those are kind of 3 rhythms, if you will, that permeate my life, and that's kind of the icing on the cake. Above and beyond that is whenever I'm in preparation for something, is really taking that opportunity to dive deep into things a little meatier than maybe you would do on a regular morning or something like that. So dig into some of the the deeper theology or whatever that you're working through.
Very good. Well, I see your son. Maybe there's a shoe being tied here in the back. Hey, there they are. So introduce us to your family there in the back.
Are you going to make them walk up here? They don't seem excited.
Only if they want to. They don't need to. Oh, well, coming on all the way up. No problem.
Matt's going to make them.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to be on the poop list now. I know it. Sorry about that.
Yeah, you can see Liam's excited.
Oh, yes, yes. All right. Introduce us
Okay,
to your family.
so on the end there, that's Liam. You feel like waving? No?
Yeah, hi, Liam.
Yep, so I talk about Liam as our fun, creative, he's our theater buff, movie kid, and then Aravis, who's tucked in there.
Hello, Aravis.
She's our gymnast and athlete, and also princess. I forgot to mention.
Princess.
She's our princess. She loves the shiny, blingy things. Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
So Nikki used to work at a clothing store called Justice. Anybody know that store?
I
Yes.
still shop there.
Wow, I'm surprised.
Can't wear it on Sunday.
It
but,
looks
you
like
know, at home.
staff meetings.
Daniel
So-
looks particularly good in some Justice outfits, I know. Yeah.
So she's our fashionista because she got a lot of her style there. And then this is my wife Nikki, the dairy farmer.
Yes. Really good. Well, welcome to you guys. Didn't mean to embarrass you. I saw you guys back there and just wanted to introduce you guys. Our time is done. We need to be done and out of here so the second service people can come in. Thank you guys for staying around. Thank you to all of you who submitted questions. We probably got through, somewhere around 20 questions, so that's pretty good. Congregational meeting tonight is at 6:30, and it's right in here. We invite you to come back. You don't need to be a member to come. Members vote, but you can come and add your voice, ask questions, listen to how the meeting goes. We'd love to have you come back. But besides that, Mike, thank you so much for your time. Thank you guys for coming.